Welcome to the D-Tools What's the Buzz podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jason Knott, Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist at D-Tools, and with me is...
Hi, I'm Tim Bagonis. I'm the CMO here at D-Tools. And, you're probably going, why are you guys doing this? Why do we need another podcast? Well, we figured, Jason and I have so many friends in this industry, going back I'm almost 20 years, and Jason, I think, more than that, realized that we only get to see our industry friends, at trade shows and other things throughout the year. And everybody's got a great story and something to share. And we wanted to start a podcast where we could really impart some valuable knowledge to the industry, and really get to hang out with our friends a bit more.
That's awesome, Tim. I'm so excited by this. And if you want to join us, please reach out to us. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on Spotify or Apple, or watch us on the YouTube channel. And please don't miss a single episode of the What's the Buzz podcast. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the D-Tools What's the Buzz podcast, episode 1. I'm Jason Knott, Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist at D-Tools, and alongside me is my co-host, Tim Bagonis, Chief Marketing Officer at D-Tools. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. We're both so excited about starting the What's the Buzz podcast, and we couldn't have selected a more appropriate topic for our first podcast than one of the most, if not the most important elements of the business right now, which is service. So I can recall a very successful integrator telling me one time that anybody can do an installation, but not everybody can service it. And he saw, rightly so, service as a great differentiator for his business. And I agree with him on that point. And think about all the benefits that service can bring to an integration business. Paves the way for future upgrades, with that same customer, because you're in constant communication with them. It paves the way for new business from that customer, whether it's a second home or their office or their next home. It opens the door for referrals. You're in constant communication with that customer who's, again, identifying his friends, his business partners for you to work with. And, I don't say last but not least, it certainly brings important cash flow to your integration business. So in the form of, obviously, service agreements. So I could go on and on about the bullet points of the value of service, but those are just kind of the high level points. So with Tim and I today to talk about service are the two preeminent experts in service. One Vision Resources, which is the leading provider of service solutions for integrators. And we actually just collaborated on a special report on best practices for service integration companies. It's going to be up on the D-Tools website very soon, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. We're excited about that. And to talk about the do's and don'ts of service and to give everybody a glimpse of that report, and also some education about what they could be doing within their own service departments. With me are Joey Kolchinsky, founder and CEO of One Vision Resources. Hey, Joey.
Hey, Jason.
And also Jason Griffin, Director of Product at One Vision. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Jason. Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Great.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is because we like having our friends that we can talk to on a more consistent basis. So Tim is, the much more friendly of the duo here. So Tim, why don't you kind of get the background on Joey and Jason for us?
Well, I'd like to say that for our first one, we got some awesome guests, and Joey and I actually go back quite a long time. I mean, back when Joey was an integrator, and I think I sold him D-Tools SI back version 5 or version 6, something like that. Very long time ago. So Joey, tell me a little bit about really, what drove you to form One Vision, and what was it that inspired you to build this?
I got into this business in 2001 when I was in high school, and I think I got very lucky with who my first client was. He was a wealthy individual in the Boston area who just wanted his technology taken care of. And for him, technology meant iPods, computers, email, calendars, things like that. And so I was very focused on the IT side of things, and the IT industry was fairly mature with service already. The idea of a managed services provider was a mature concept. And over time, this one client mentored me into becoming effectively the service provider of his dreams, right? And what that meant for him was some, at the time, crazy concepts like, Joey, you shouldn't even mark up on hardware. You should just charge me enough for labor and pass the hardware cost along. And here I am, naive high school, college kid, entering into the
That's a
tech
great
industry,
idea.
doing stuff like that, right? And over time, eventually got into the integration space because these clients loved the service, loved the responsiveness. I was instantly responsive to them all the time. And they would say, well, I have this rack of equipment in the basement and it does all my audio video. And I was fairly naive back then, just a lot more naive than I am today. I'm only a little less naive these days. And I was like, yeah, I think I can service and support this stuff. And I took my service model into the integration space, right? So I was already familiar with it. It was natural to me, this idea of building a business based on the ongoing care and support for a client as I became their technology manager was something that I was focused on. And only over time was I presented with opportunities to be what we would call today a smart home integrator or a professional installer, because a client would say, hey, I'm building a new house. Of course, I've been using you for service for 10 years. Can you now do my smart home project? And, I brought my service model into the integration space and recognized that, for me at least, that the future of my whole business was going to be based on the longevity of my relationships with these clients. I had built up $1.2 million a year in recurring revenue doing service and support just for 40 families. It's like $2,500 a month per client, and we weren't even talking about installing new hardware. So that was my experience since 2010 when I pushed that business model for the first time. And I could see, for me at least, I could see what the potential was. The potential is so massive for those people who really saw the value in the relationship and in the ongoing service. And of course, yes, there is so much value on the integration side in the project. It's a ton of value there. To me, this is a yes and conversation. Yes, right. Let's go be phenomenal project installers. And I have so much respect for the integrators who have learned how to do that efficiently and profitably. It's so clear they did way better than I ever did as a service provider coming into the project business. And let's also capitalize on the opportunity to create these phenomenal experiences that also drive substantial revenue and profitability, and then feed back into the project side of the business.
Yeah, I think the first instinct was always like, let's get this job done and go the next, right? Let's get this job done and go the next, and shifting that mindset into, well, this is a lifetime client, right? Is really the shift. Jason, how about you? How did you get into this, and what drew you to OneVision?
Yeah. So I've been with OneVision now for a little over 7 years. So it's been a while. Been on this journey with Joey and the rest of the team. Prior to that, I was a residential integrator for close to 15 years. So been in the industry for a while. Started out kind of crawling around in the crawl spaces and attics, pulling wire, with the guys, and moved into doing rack and trim work. Spent a number of years as a programmer, and then really hit my stride as a project manager and operations guy. So I've got a really deep background in executing projects, and then all of the service and everything that comes after that. So I had reached a point in my career where I was really, struggling with a lot of that. And long story short, Joey and I met. You may know Tim, and some of your listeners may know I used to do a podcast years ago called the Home Tech Podcast. That show's still going. I'm no longer a part of it. But through that podcast, I had met Joey, and he and I had built a relationship. And so they were forming at the time what was the initial stages of the partner development team, which is still a really critical part of our operation here. That's kind of our customer success account management arm. And Joey approached me and said, "Hey, I'd love to, have you come work in the lab here at One Vision and help us figure out what we're doing." And it really resonated. The opportunity really resonated with me, especially because of those past experiences that I had at the time. Those experiences I was going through on a day-to-day basis, just dealing with the challenge of service in our industry. It's an enormously difficult thing to do. It's easy to sit on a podcast and talk to integrators about how they should be better at service and take it more seriously. But when you live that experience, it's not easy. Even in a vacuum, it's not simple. And then the reality is that integrators are trying to do this like on top of running their day-to-day businesses. So They got tons of plates spinning. It's an enormously difficult thing that really impacts clients, it impacts businesses, and it impacts employees in terms of work-life balance and just personal sanity. So the problem space that One Vision was operating in was deeply resonant to me individually, and that's really what drew me in. And it's been 7 years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, one of probably the biggest challenge is helping integrators understand how to even get started, because it's so daunting, right?
100%.
So I'm going to toss it to Jason, because he's got all the meaty questions. And I thank you guys both for being here. It's just it's awesome to have you guys here and help us kick off our podcast series.
Yeah, love it. Thanks for having us.
It's beautiful because everybody's got their own unique path that they took into this industry, and it's always interesting to hear that. And so I mentioned before that we have this best practices document that we put together. We've identified 14 key best practices that integrators need to have as part of their businesses. But before we jump into that, we don't have time to go through all of them. So I'm teasing you for the white paper, everybody. But before we jump into that, let's kind of talk about a big picture. And Joey, I want to ask this question to you. How is the industry's impression of service changed throughout the years to the point where now we even have this conversation about the necessity of having a service division?
It's been really interesting being part of that story and watching it play out. And then as I got involved in 2010, 11, 12, even going back and reading some of the older articles and sort of getting a sense for where it really started, I think the first, foray into service was really about this idea of taking security RMR and copying it. And, this idea of, we can, it's going to be just as simple as monitoring, right? You just say we're going to monitor stuff and just throw some RMR on top of it, and people will just naturally sign up. And that's where I know a lot of the content, Jason, you and I, connected on in some articles, back, almost 14 years ago. That's where some initial discussion started. But then IHEG came along, and we actually had a monitoring device, and we actually tried to implement it across the industry. And the very next question was, well, okay, great, I have this monitoring device, but who's going to actually do the monitoring? Who's going to respond when these notifications come up? And I still remember in IHEG's boardroom, with Stuart and Mike and with the team there, we even talked about, do we need to create a call center? Like, is that something we have to do? And at the time, we didn't think it was the right move. But the industry was evolving from, okay, this is just as straightforward as security. Let's just slap that on an invoice and see what happens. To now, the next step was integrators saying, well, I really just don't want to do the truck roll, and I want to avoid the truck roll. And that was really coming from a place of not knowing how to monetize the truck roll. And the truck roll was representing a substantial opportunity cost in the form of getting in the way of the next project, right? So, okay, now how do we use this monitoring tool to remotely reboot things so that we don't have to go on site and enter oversee and WAP boxes and things like that? Still not terribly clear, actually, what the true value was to the end user when we're talking about monitoring. We as an industry, I think, really saw it as it saves us time. So even if I can't get the end user to pay for it, at least it's saving me time, right? As an integrator. And I think the phase we're in now is, and we're seeing this, and really, like, it's really amazing to see integrators develop this thought process around this, is integrators developing this pride in their service and saying, actually, my service and support to you is really good. And that's taken several years for us to develop that confidence. And it's almost like a little kid who finally stands up tall for the first time and defends themselves, right? And this industry has been doing this for many years, but we've always struggled to confidently say, look, I will be there for you 24/7. Whenever you need me, consistently, I will take care of you. And when you can say that confidently, it means you can actually now sell that promise, sell that guarantee. And that is the phase that I think we're in right now. And the neat thing is this is another example of yes and throughout the experience. We're not actually saying that the prior concepts are invalid. No, monitoring is still really valuable, and preventing unnecessary truck rolls is really valuable. Clients don't want you in the home more than you don't want to be there, right? But also providing phenomenal support is really valuable. And then, of course, if we can do it all more efficiently and effectively, then we can continue to go and engage with new clients and do great sales and do great project management and go close more jobs and feed them into the service process. So the idea now is let's bring order to all the chaos and let's monetize this great interaction. So I think the industry's come a really long way in 15 to 20 years. And at this point is now actually seeing it to be more than just the recurring revenue. Now we're getting into what about our billable hours and what about our upsells and our ability to add on upgrades. But I think it starts from bringing order to the chaos and loving the service you're creating for your clients and having so much confidence in it that you're able to now market it and sell it effectively.
Yeah, and Jason, there's been some changing dynamics in the market that have kind of helped push the need for service. Talk a little bit about that as to what's gone on from the business model standpoint, and then also the connectivity of devices and how that's become, something that makes service imperative.
Yeah. I think I described this sort of as a rock and a hard place scenario. So you've got a couple of different macro forces kind of driving a need to focus really on service in general, but specifically on creating a premium service program. So on one hand, the CEDIA channel has been around for a long time. It's really an industry that kind of cut its teeth on doing projects with high margin specialized equipment going into homes. And in many respects, that's still the case, right? There's still lots of parts of the business where, lighting, shades, amplifiers, speakers, where you can still make really healthy product margins. And that's great. There are also elements of the business where that's not the case anymore. So the kind of the real exaggerated example is flat panel TVs, right? I remember a time when a 65-inch plasma was a $20,000 purchase, and now you go get one that's 10 times the quality of those old ones for under $1,000 at Costco, right? And that's not totally unique to displays. There's control processors, networking, house audio. There's lots of components in the home where the pricing margins have really gotten compressed over time, and that I think that trend, there's no reason to believe that trend won't continue. On the other hand, what's also happened is the level of complexity in the systems has gone up. So it used to be a lot simpler to install, a high-end audio video system in the home, and now everything's got an IP address. There's networking, there's passwords, there's just a lot more moving parts. And so with that has come an increase in the need for really around the clock service and tech support. So these are these two kind of rock and a hard place trends that are happening, where on one hand, the need for support is skyrocketing over time, steadily going up faster and faster. And then on the other hand, a lot of the revenues and margin that used to help offset or subsidize some of those ongoing service and support costs are getting compressed. So you have a scenario where it's harder financially to provide service, but there's more service being required of integrators. And so that I think has led to this over time. We've seen this steady trend of integrators really wanting to understand, how can I make service a more profitable part of the business, not just through recurring revenue, but also having better systems in place to make sure that billable hours are being captured and billed for appropriately, and all that sort of thing. So I think the investment in the service side of the business, to Joey's point earlier, doesn't have to eclipse projects. Like it can't, it's an and thing. It's, you want that project side of the business to be profitable and thriving, but you also need that service side to kind of stand on its own more so than maybe it used to be necessary, financially speaking.
There was a time back I remember in 2010 when I was doing service full time and I was more on the IT side of things. And I actually had an existential fear for my business thinking, um, you know, man, this tech is going to get so simple. Like, I just don't like, are they really going to need tech support? Are people really going to need service? And maybe I have it wrong. And I remember fearing that for maybe a year or two, and then just coming to the realization and conclusion that tech was getting cheaper, was getting more, it was becoming more accessible, was becoming more prolific, and was, becoming something that everybody was ever more dependent on. And I kept paying attention to the IT industry and seeing that, the IT industry was way more mature than our industry and was working with businesses for decades at this point. And IT departments have larger budgets today than they ever have before. Whether it's done in-house for the business or it's done with an IT department, an outsourced IT provider or whatnot, there's more money being spent on technology and tech support and tech management within a business than ever before. And I think we can all probably agree that the same thing is happening here in the home. And there will likely be many successful businesses who capitalize on that aspect of the relationship. And I think integrators are so perfectly positioned to do that because they already have the ear of clients who happen to have a lot of technology, have the discretionary income to pay for better support options. And this industry is the best equipped. We have the trucks, we have the tools, right? We have the knowledge. We just need to put the pieces together more efficiently and package it nicely and present it to the client. And we've got a phenomenal valuable offering that I think many consumers would be interested in.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think I would say, what do you say to the integrator that says, but I've always given my guys 24/7. It's what I do. They've got access to my cell phone. They can get me any time of the day, and now I'm gonna have to charge them for that. How do I make that? That change or that leap? And I'm afraid that if I'm not available 24/7, I'm going to lose my clients. How do we help get them over the edge or over that fear? What have you found as you've been working with clients?
I'm going to ask Jason to actually answer most of this, but I always like to tee up the conversation with just a quick disclaimer. No matter what we say, or no matter how good we get at having these conversations, you will always have a handful of clients who will be what I call unreasonable. And they will just want to do it the way it was always done, and they'll be harder to have a conversation with. And they might be a little bit more reticent to want to pay for something, even if it's valuable, no matter how reasonable the fee is. So let's just assume for now that 5% of your clients think that way, and it'll be a little bit more of a difficult conversation. But 95% of the clients are actually quite reasonable. And I just want to frame that because it's a good, healthy way to think about this.
Absolutely.
Because it's actually two different strategies to handle either group. Jason, you can probably speak to that.
There's a sort of business parable I heard recently that I might butcher a little bit, but it's this idea of, the Smith family. They get together for the holidays every year, and there's this famous roast recipe that has been passed down through the generations. So it's the Smith family roast for the holidays, and one year it sort of gets put out on the table, and there's a sort of guest at the table who stops to ask a question for the first time, because part of this recipe has always been to cut the ends off of the roast before it goes into the oven, and nobody's really thought about it. So this guy asks, like, well, why do you do that? And they all sort of sit there and start scratching their heads, and then eventually one of them says, well, I heard that great grandma Smith had her oven was too small to fit the full roast. So this thing has been just like propagating down through the generations of like cutting the ends off of this roast, and everyone assumed it was some secret to unlock the flavor or something. And the point, of course, is that like just because something has been done a certain way for a certain period of time doesn't mean that you shouldn't stop periodically and ask, is this the best way to continue doing this? Right. And so service is like that. It's something that I think we sort of fell into as an industry because we have these remote support capabilities. So when you pick up the phone and you call your plumber, you don't expect them to spend half an hour with you on the phone talking you through how to, unclog your sink in your bathroom. You don't expect the electrician necessarily to walk you through taking the outlet off the wall and checking the wires. Like, there's an implicit expectation that when you call those places, you're going to schedule an appointment. They're going to come out to your site and they're going to fix the issue. In our industry, it's different because we have these remote capabilities, which are great, but we never really stop to think about, should we just be giving away this 24/7 remote support, right? Or is there something here that we should be questioning? So I think that's kind of point number one, is like, just because it's been done a certain way, like, zoom back out and ask if it's really right for your business. And then I think a little more prosaically speaking, like, Joey is 100% right, and we've seen this over the years with so many integrators that come onto the platform, is that the fear of how clients respond is always greater than the reality of how they actually do respond.
Right.
The reality is that many of these clients are business owners themselves. They fully understand that things change, that businesses have to evolve, and when you approach them with thoughtfully crafted messaging and options and choice, they're fine. In fact, we probably receive twice as many emails from clients, anecdotally speaking. I don't have hard data on this, but anecdotally speaking, we probably receive twice as many emails back from clients that are like, I'm glad you're doing this, as we do from clients that are like, what is going on? Why is this happening? So those clients are out there, the ones who are going to be negative about it, but you really cannot let those clients control the future of your business. You have to make choices based on what's going on now, the trends moving forward, and what you anticipate for your company. And we think that, having some sort of premium support program in place is as far as we're concerned, it's a no-brainer. We're a little biased, obviously, but we think there's good reason for that.
Jason alluded to what that process is, right? Like, thoughtful messaging, providing clients with options, and also having some grace, right? Let's remember that these clients have gotten used to getting free tech support for a very long time. And it's actually our responsibility to gently transition them to a sustainable model, which, by the way, everybody has a shared interest in ensuring the business model of your company is sustainable. The client doesn't want you to go away. And these clients are intelligent. They know that if you don't have a sustainable business model, they understand that many other integrators also probably struggle with this problem. So they're not going to just say, oh, well, if you go out of business, I'll find someone else. They actually want you to stay in business. They want to make sure that this is a long-term endeavor. And so having some grace and maybe saying, like, look, we're going to make this change, but for you, I understand, you've been with us for 10 years. Let's push this out 3 months. We can have this conversation in 3 months. I'll provide you with complimentary remote support, but then I will need to sit down and have this conversation with you, and we'll talk through it. And you always have the choice for those handful of clients who do resist it. If you want to keep them, you can give them free remote support or discounted remote support. Just like sometimes maybe you give them a discount on a project because they've been a client of yours for so long. You also have the choice to say, nope, we will not give it for free. And maybe the client goes in another direction. But the point is you have that choice.
Right.
Nobody is saying that just because you start charging for a service you offer, that it means that you have to now, stick to that 100% and burn relationships. Accommodations can be made. And that's a very normal thing to do that I think this industry is already very good at, given the kinds of clients we've all learned to build great relationships with.
Right. And I'm sure you're helping your clients and integrators get over that every day. That's probably a conversation you have every day.
That's actually the genesis of the partner development team that Jason joined 7 years ago, because we realized that we needed to have a lot of attention put into helping our partners make this change. Change management is a very difficult thing. It's not as easy as just not slicing the ends off the roasts anymore, right?
We hear you. We feel that every day at D-Tools,
totally.
Right? We're helping companies change the way that they're doing their business. And it's the same way. And, it's a good little segue is that we worked very closely with OneVision to help put together our service offering within DTools Cloud, helping integrators get over that change as well, helping them present options and plans to their clients and then manage it through. So it's that change and that fear of change that we spend a lot of our time in those same conversations.
Hey guys, I want to touch on something that I know that the listeners are probably asking themselves, which is, and you guys have both kind of addressed it a little bit, is what does a service plan look like in terms of, I know you guys are proponents of establishing a tiered program. Give us a sense of what a tiered service plan looks like and what might be some of the different benefits that come with each of those tiers.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this. Ultimately, we believe that simple is good, right? Keep it simple and start with, access to 24/7 remote support. That, again, as we alluded to just a few minutes ago, is the base layer. And don't assume that needs to be given away for free to your clients anymore. That's kind of the threshold, we believe, for stepping into a premium support plan. Is if you want access to that remote support, whether it's during business hours or 24/7, you decide. But if you want access to remote support, if you want to call and have our team pick up the phone or respond to text or email and try to troubleshoot with you remotely, leveraging tools or just talking you through stuff, we do require a monthly membership for that. So we recommend that's where you start. Clients who don't want a membership can go on to an on-site delivery support model only is generally how we structure that point of entry. So that's the main threshold. There are, of course, other benefits. Like you said, Jason, we like a tiered approach. So we believe not just giving your clients either member or non-member, but giving them multiple tiers to select from, because every client's different in terms of the level of expectations they're going to have and the needs that they're going to have as it relates to supporting their system. So from that remote support layer, we go up to things like priority access and extended hours of availability. So that's a really big one, a really popular one that we see selling across the memberships that we help our integrators provide, is that ability to, number one, be guaranteed a faster response time. When you pick up the phone or send an email, we're going to respond within X minutes, guaranteed. Clients definitely value that. They also value the ability to say, look, if I'm having a really urgent issue, if I've got 50 guests over for a dinner party and the house audio system stops, I want to know that I can get somebody here on site. So that kind of rapid response, extended hours of availability, that's something as to think about as well. A third big pillar of our tiered structure is the proactive monitoring. So we're big believers that if you've got a remote, we call them RSM, so remote systems management tools. There's a variety of them out there in the industry. If you've got one of those RSM tools on site, we believe fully in using that in a reactive troubleshooting mode for any client that has access to remote support. So if a client who calls in on that, let's say, base level plan, they may not have proactive monitoring enabled, but you should still leverage that device to see what's going on the network, reboot devices in the home, et cetera. But if you want to actually flip on the proactive notifications and have that device alerting you proactively that things may be going on the network, there's a real cost associated with monitoring those notifications, triaging them. These devices, they've gotten better over the years, but they're still noisy. They still generate a lot of notifications for issues that may. What's that?
Our data shows it's 4-to-1, right? So
4-to-1.
If you turn on more monitoring, you get 4 times as many notifications from a monitoring system than you do from the clients themselves reaching out.
Yeah,
there's a lot of noise.
So it's going to produce a lot of noise, and you're going to have somebody who's costs you as a business money looking at those and triaging and figuring out if they need a response. So proactive monitoring, we believe, should be on a kind of a higher tier. Other things that we do layer in, we have one plan that we recommend selling called our signature plan. That's kind of it's the black card kind of thing for integrators. So that's cut the line every time. That's for your ultra VIP clients. We recommend pricing that at a level that only about maybe 1 to 3% of your clients are going to opt into that, right? It should be a very high price, kind of a very, very premium offering. And then in addition to that, we recommend things like we call them tech reviews. Sometimes some people think of these as proactive maintenance. We think that's kind of a limited way to think about them. But just to give people a frame of reference, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is like once or twice a year going out to the site, to meet with the client, review the system, make sure everything's working, maybe retrain them, talk about upgrade opportunities. So those sorts of tech reviews. Preferred labor rates, certainly something you can consider. So those are some of the main levers that we think about. There are some other nuanced things you can play with, but those will give you a good starting point in terms of thinking about a tiered membership structure.
And just following up on that real quick, obviously the price point that an integrator is going to develop is something I know you at One Vision work closely with them on determining that based on what's out there from a marketing standpoint or from a competitive standpoint. But what's the sweet spot that you've seen in terms of what clients will buy into and what that price range of that sweet spot might be for integrators with their pricing plan?
Yeah. So we, in conjunction with you guys over at D-Tools, have just put together this report that you've alluded to a couple of times, and in that we share that share some average pricing that everyone can go look at, download that report. There's going to be a lot of really good data and useful information in there. Generally speaking, our average price across the partner base right now for that entry level plan that provides access to 24/7 remote support is sitting at $61 a month today. So that's an average. Depending on the market that you're in, you'll be maybe above or below that. If you're serving a high-end clientele, you might be above. If you're more of a retail outfit, lower end of the market, you might be a little below. But that average gives you a good sense for where that lands. And again, that's what we call our Essentials Plus plan, and all that's really providing is access to that remote tech support. Just to give you an idea of what's included in that. From there, our next plan up, and I won't go through all of these, but just to give you an idea of our next plan up from there is what we call our priority plan. And that's where we start to recommend layering in that faster response time, extended hours of availability. We layer in preferred labor rates with this one. And that one, our average price is $171. So that's a really attractive plan. We see really nice adoption and uptake of those two plans, but especially in that priority plan. If you can get 30 to 40% of your clients to opt into that priority plan, 30 to 40% of your members, I should say, to opt into that plan instead of the base level plan, that can be a really, really profitable plan for you. So that gives you some ideas of generally how we layer it in. And I don't know, Joey, if you want to add anything to kind of the pricing conversation, but those are some of the kind of hard data points that we have.
Yeah, on the signature end, just to give you a sense, when Jason said price it so that 1 to 3% of your clients might subscribe to that, we see typical pricing on the signature end of around $600. And just to make that really clear, right, at the $65 a month plan or $61 a month plan that Jason mentioned, all they're getting for $61 a month on average is remote support. All other service is billable.
Right.
But remote support, tier 1 remote support, is included at $61 a month. So it's not just $61 a month of revenue, it's $61 a month plus whatever your average number of billable hours are per client. So really each client is likely worth a couple $100 per month more than that. At the signature end, all they're really getting is unlimited remote support plus same-day scheduling, and all of it a little bit faster. Basically, the ability to cut the line anytime they want, which is what those clients expect anyway, and what you would have likely found yourself doing when that client reached out anyway. But now you actually created an option for them so that you can say, yes, I am willing to do it, right, at this rate. And we see some integrators at the luxury end charging as much as $1,000 a month for that. And at the lower end on the retail side might be more like $300 or $400 a month. But by putting it there, while only a handful of clients might select it, it bookends your offerings. And it helps clients understand where the span of offerings are and what the span of client requests are. And they can then choose for themselves where they want to be. The last thing I'll share is that our total average across the board is $110 per month across all integrators, all subscriptions. And that's up from, I think, $85 a month or so, or $80 a month from several years ago. And so I simply want to point out that we've seen an increase in the price and an increase in the adoption and in the uptake, over the last few years. Service has not become less valuable. Service has become much more valuable.
One other area I want to touch on really quickly, if we can, and that it's this murkiness that that exists in the market on when does something transition from being an installation to service. So many integrators, they're out there and the system's working, but they're still engraving keypads and those sorts of things that happen later. You have developed what you call a day one concept that you really want integrators to try and adopt. Can you address that really briefly, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, as you alluded to, predicated on the notion that unfortunately, in our industry, defining the end of a project and the beginning of a service relationship is nowhere near as simple as we would like it to be. It is a very muddy, kind of messy process because unlike, I frequently think about other trades and how we compare. So, a painter, it's very easy to tell if a painter's done. You walk in the room, it's the right color. Plumber, you can flush the toilet, you can turn on the sink. Electrician, the lights turn on, the outlets work. Those are all fairly straightforward things. And I'm sure, if there are any plumbers or electricians listening, I'm probably glossing over some details. But, I think the point still stands. Like a technology system's a whole different animal, right? So there's all this gray area of like, well, what's done and what's not. Like the client goes to turn on their TV and the Hulu app is not installed on the Apple TV because they never actually told you that they're a Hulu user. And even if they did, you may not handle that for your clients. You might expect them to do that themselves, right? So like that's one example. There's lighting scenes. There's whole home automations where, the goodbye scene, like all of these things, streaming services. So there's a million of these examples where technically all the equipment's installed, it's all generally working, but there's still stuff to do, right? And so ultimately, like you get really wrapped around the axle. I found when I was an integrator and still today when we work with integrators, you can get really wrapped around the axle if you're trying to create your project closeout processes around the assumption that the closeout is easy to define. It's not. So let's lean into that and let's accept it. And that was kind of the genesis of this whole, what we call the day one process. So it starts with day one, and that day one has a very specific definition, which is the first day that a client is going to be in the home using the technology on their own and expecting it to work. So not with you standing there, babysitting them, holding their hand, talking them through, but they're going to be using it on their own. And in very small systems, that's like super straightforward. If you just hang a TV on the wall and you program a URC, like that's pretty easy to tell when day one is going to be. It's the first movie night. On the other extreme end of the spectrum, if you're doing a 28,000 square foot mansion in Beverly Hills, like day ones could be all over the map, right? There could be entire wings of the house that aren't finished yet. But if they're in the home starting to use the technology, then we believe that's day one. And day one kicks off what we call the project to service transition. That can be anywhere from 30 to 90 days typically. And that is a transitional period where you are finishing up all those loose ends. You're kind of standing up these concepts in the client's mind so they understand there's a process. This is where I am now. You can kind of draw a map and say, we're here on day one. Here's what's going to happen for the next 60 days. You can expect the following. At the end of the 60 days, here's what it looks like. And so laying all of that out for the client, really managing those expectations. There's a lot more detail I could go into, but in the interest of time, I'll just kind of close it out by saying that like during that transitional period, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days, we suggest providing a complimentary premium period. We call these a CPP, is a little bit of OneVision jargon there. So provide that the day one kicks off your CPP or your complimentary premium period. And that is a period of time where you're going to give that client a free membership essentially. And there are lots of reasons you can do this. Some people like to think of it as a trial, a sort of try it before you buy it thing, which, I think is a fine way to think about it. But I think it misses the whole, one of the bigger points, which is the reality is when a client first moves into the home, they're going to expect that level of service. They're going to need that level of service. And really, if you're a good integrator, you're going to provide it. So like, why not put a wrapper around it, formalize it, and just say, this is your CPP, here's what you're going to get. And then at the end of this 90 days, you can draw kind of a line in the sand and then say, if you want that level going forward, here's what it looks like. So that's in a nutshell what our day one process is about. We've been using that for years. It's stood the test of time. It's one of the more popular concepts on our platform that we get a lot of feedback from our integrator partners that's really helped transform that what was previously a very tricky, messy part of the business.
Yeah, I can
great
see.
Advice. Great advice. All right. So in the interest of time, so I want to mention, the white paper that we put together, jointly talks about so many other topics related to service. We're going to talk about in there. There's a discussion that talks about recurring revenue targets for your company. There's discussion about having a dedicated service team. There's talks about when you should be having this sales conversation with the customer about service. So there's a lot of really, really good information in there. But I want to throw it to Tim for kind of the closeout here, and then remind everybody who's listening, if you can, to make sure you hit that subscribe button on Spotify and Apple, and also check us out on the D-Tools YouTube channel. But Tim, go for it.
Well, I think it was great. It was just great information. I want to thank Joey and Jason for joining us today. Joey, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Our website's www.onevisionresources.com. We have a phenomenal sales team led by Brad Camp, who many people know in the industry, and he will provide impressive response times, true to our service name, and get right back to you and start up a conversation. So we're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for helping us kick off our series. I think it was a great topic. And if you guys like what like you saw today, as Jason said, reach out, subscribe on Spotify and Apple, and you can always see us at www.d-tools.com. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.